I'm going to talk about PrEP in England. And as Will pointed out, actually, the timeline for PrEP in terms of PrEP activism preceded my second slide. People have been arguing for PrEP and talking about it for many years, Gus and Will among them. And of course, there was also the PROUD trial, which I'm sure many of you know a lot about and was very important in the development of the case for PrEP in England. But I'm going to start talking about our National Health Service, which is funded directly by general taxation and provides healthcare free at the point of need. And historically, the NHS has paid for all antiretrovirals, not just for treatment for people living with HIV, but also for prevention. It funds post-exposure prophylaxis, PEP. So when PrEP came along and we saw IPREX and we saw IPEGAY and PROUD, everyone assumed, including the NHS, that it would be the NHS that would have to decide whether or not to pay for PrEP. So the NHS set up a working group. Gus and I were amongst those on it in September 2014, and we started looking at efficacy and need and demand and cost effectiveness. And it's a long and slow decision-making process in our National Health Service. We started in 2014. The decision was expected in June 2016. But then in March of 2016, just before the decision was due, the NHS suddenly turned around and said, we've had legal advice, we don't have the legal powers to fund prevention, only treatment. And they didn't give any suggestion as to who else might fund PrEP in their absence. We didn't believe that argument. We thought it was just they were worried about cost. But it left us at a dead end. The NHS wasn't prepared to pay for PrEP, and no one else seemed to be willing to pay for PrEP either. Alongside this work of the NHS over a number of years thinking about PrEP, there was a lot of community mobilisation. There was the United for PrEP coalition of organisations and individuals and Women for PrEP, bringing people together to have consistent policies and strategies and tactics in making the case for PrEP. PrEPster website we've heard about from Will and Mark in terms of energising activism, One PrEP Now, which Greg founded, enabling thousands of people in the UK to buy PrEP generically online from overseas, which is legal in the UK for personal use. Clinicians making their clinics PrEP ready, supporting people accessing generic PrEP, and a lot of work in the media and in Parliament as well. So the NHS decision-making was in parallel with all this community activity. And here's a visual of some of us outside, demonstration outside the Department of Health and various materials that were produced. NAT, we felt our role in all of this community activism was to challenge the NHS's claim that they didn't have the legal power to commission PrEP, to pay for PrEP. So we went to court and we won both times in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. So the court said that the NHS did have the legal power to pay for prevention, and it did have the legal power to pay for PrEP. Importantly, the court judgment didn't force the NHS to pay for PrEP. It forced the NHS to come to a decision about whether to pay for PrEP. Not quite the same thing. But they had to restart their decision-making process, and at the end of 2016, they announced a large-scale impact trial as their response to the decision-making process that had taken place. So this is what we have. I'd ask you to look at the bottom bullet. They have committed, the NHS, to implement a wide, routine and national rollout of PrEP in due course. But for the next 3 years, we have a £10 million funded large-scale implementation trial for at least or about 10,000 people. I'd ask you to note that in English law, you can use generic drugs, even when the version is on patent, if it is for a trial or a study. So there's clearly a cost advantage to the NHS in beginning with a trial. So that's the basic structure of the trial. These are the questions that the trial is asking. What proportion of people going to sexual health clinics will be high risk and eligible for PrEP? What proportion will be offered it, and how many will accept? How long will people be on PrEP? And what's the impact on HIV incidence and what's the impact on STI incidence? These are all really important and interesting questions in modelling health service provision. I don't see why they need to precede the routine rollout of PrEP, why you can't have the study at the same time as routine provision. But anyway, what we've decided in England is to begin with this trial and then move to routine provision. Very busy slide. Apologies for that. You can look at the record in due course. Who is eligible for PrEP? Men who have sex with men, who have had condomless anal sex at least once in the last 3 months and expect to do so again. People in a sero-different relationship where the positive partner doesn't have a suppressed viral load. And anybody, the third category, who a clinician thinks is at a similarly high level of risk as people in categories A and B. So a large majority of English sexual health clinics have signed up or registered to be part of the trial. And I think it's important to note that there is a particular allocation of places for each clinic based on local incidence. There are separate allocations within the 10,000 places. There are ring-fenced allocations for gay and bisexual men on the one hand and for women and others on the other hand. And this is to make sure that we have time during the trial to recruit from women, trans women, heterosexual men, and not allow all the places to be taken up at first go by a big rush of gay and bisexual men filling up all the places. So there are separate allocations. Each trial place can only be used once. So there are 10,000 places, but if someone is on PrEP for 3 weeks, that's it. The place is gone. So whether you're on it for 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, it's one place and you can't, as it were, pass it on to somebody else. One of the issues, certainly, it took a long time from December 2016 to actually have the first clinic open for PrEP. The first PrEP clinic only opened in October 2017, and there's still quite a few clinics that are not open for recruitment. So as at 1st of February, where are we? 84 clinics open for recruitment out of 160. 2 clinics already have completely filled their allocations for the whole 3 years. A further 13 clinics have filled their allocations for gay and bisexual men, or men who have sex with men. So in the first 3.5 months of the trial, a trial for 10,000 people, 4,207 people have already been recruited. So we're nearly halfway after not even 4 months of a 3-year trial. So you can see the problem. So what are the ongoing issues? Certainly, and this is a theme that's developing, of those 4,200 places, the vast majority are gay and bisexual men. So there is a real issue about promoting PrEP to those other than white, older gay men who seem to be the majority of those accessing PrEP so far. With now gay men actually being turned away from clinics, people are asking, do we have the allocation numbers right between gay and bisexual men on the one hand and women on the other? Have we got the allocation of numbers between clinics right? The big London clinics, there's immense demand, they have waiting lists. Have we given them enough places? These are all the kind of questions that are being asked. What do we do now clinics are filling up so quickly? Should we try to make the case for increasing the number of places on the trial? It's just 10,000 at the moment. Can we make the research case for increasing the number of places further? But really, and I think this is all sort of fiddling while Rome burns, how can we make the case to move from the trial to routine provision for everybody? How do we speed up the clinics also to open their doors? The final question, or the ultimate question, is this kind of compromise or halfway house provision an effective jumping-off point for arguing and advocating for the routine provision of PrEP? Thank you.